They're chunky. They're thick boys. Hi, hello friends and strangers. Today I will be talking about the Chaos Trilogy by Patrick Ness. They're chunky. They're thick boys. I'll start with The Knife of Never Letting Go. It's the first book in the series, obviously. I read this back in 2018 and I remember loving it so much. But what is it about? There is this planet called New World, and it is where men and animals can hear each and everyone's thoughts and dreams and feelings. It is a planet that isn't Earth because as I was reading it, it kept implying that there are two moons. So I was like, okay, so this isn't Earth. And I think this took place way beyond the future, like when people have found life outside of Earth. The Knife of Never Letting Go focused on this town called Prentisstown. It focused on our main character Todd Hewitt, who is 12 years old and was living with his two dads. And it was odd because like in Prentisstown there are no women at all. So there are just men and the animals. So Prentisstown is a place where a boy can be a man when they turn 13 years old, which is weird. So one day, the main character, again, Todd Hewitt, along with his dog Manchi, came upon a spot near the swamp where it's just quiet. When he's back in Prentisstown, there's just noise all over. They call it noise. When it's a combination or a culmination of every thought or every dreams of every man in the town, so they call it noise. In that place that he discovered in the swamp, it doesn't have any noise at all, so it was just quiet. I fell in love with the concept of hearing everyone's thoughts, and it includes animals, and I was just very curious, like, what would my dog think? Or like, what would my dog talk to me about? It's such an interesting take because like, they don't talk, they don't talk like humans, like, you know, conversing, having verbs, having adjectives, having nouns. So the characteristics of the creatures are personalized, or personalized. Okay. Take two. The characteristics of the animals were personified in a way. Like when Manchi, the dog of Todd Hewitt, would just, you know, say one or two words like Manchi hungry or Manchi pee. So like, you know, it's still kind of accurate with how they are as animals. It's such a fast-paced and action-packed book and will leave you so annoyed and full of pity on Todd because like he's just 12. Like there will be times that you'll remember that, oh, he's 12, so the decisions that he's making is apt for a 12-year-old. He just couldn't catch a break throughout this whole book. Like there's death here and there and finding out the truth about his town and their messed up traditions and rituals. It was just so much for him. When he went home from the swamp, you know, people started hearing his noise. You know, as much as he wants to keep it to himself, the fact that they heard the word quiet in his noise, they were like, hold up, boy. The Knife of Never Letting Go had a lot to do with Todd running away from Prentisstown to survive because for some reason the mayor of Prentisstown wants him so bad. So yeah, it follows the journey of Todd meeting other people, running away from the men of Prentisstown. The book is like a roller coaster ride of pain and hope and pain again and then hope again and then more pain. This book also reminded me that men are trash and that We truly do not deserve dogs at all. They're so precious. Manchi, I stan. I stan Manchi forever. Like, if there's a character in this book that is my favorite, it's Manchi. He's just so pure and innocent and so protective. I think I described Manchi more than I described Todd. I also listened to the audiobook while I was reading it with my eyes, and it's fantastic. Like, hands down, the narration was so good. So I highly suggest listening to the audiobook while you're reading it with your eyes. Even though the Chaos Walking Trilogy is literally 3 books, Patrick Ness also released 3 novellas that go along with each book. For The Knife of Never Letting Go, the companion novella was The New World, and it's supposedly the prequel to The Knife of Never Letting Go in the point of view of Viola months before their ship landed in New World. So Viola is one of the characters that Todd will meet in the first book. It shows how reluctant she was with going to New World with her parents, and then things happened when they got here. The prequel doesn't necessarily add something new to the story. It's sort of a foreshadowing on who exactly we will meet in the sequels. Although I wasn't really that into the novella, it was interesting to hear from the perspective of pre-New World Viola and how much New World and what happened to her parents have changed her and affected her. So yeah, I gave this book 3 stars, and I gave The Knife of Never Letting Go still 5 stars because it's still close to my heart. The next one is The Ask and the Answer, so the second book in the trilogy. It's one of my favorite editions because it's such a cool edition. Like, you have all black cover, the sprayed edges. The Ask and the Answer follows Todd and Viola's journey to freedom from Prentisstown because they weren't, able to get away from Mayor Prentice as he colonizes a quiet town called Haven. So it was where Todd and Viola went to. They believed that Haven is where the civilization is. Like, it's where they'll find peace, and it's where they'll find security. But kind of a spoiler, the mayor colonized that town that they found and called it the New Prentisstown and appointed himself as the president. He's saying that he only came to establish peace in the place. The difference with this one is that with The Knife of Never Letting Go, the book is told in Todd's perspective, but with The Ask and the Answer, we also got chapters told in Viola's point of view, and the writing is still brilliant. It didn't lose the thrilling factor of the story. There was still so much at stake for Todd and Viola, especially now that Todd has someone with him. The character development is also amazing and had me really invested on a lot of the characters, actually, and not just Todd and Viola. What I also like about this book is that it further shells out the social commentary on colonization, war, genocide, and the price people have to pay just to get power. It also made me think that dictators really have a way with their words, because like with Mayor Prentice, it's like he can woo you to like saying yes for something that is awful. Additionally, I mentioned genocide and colonization. 4 humans arrived in New World. There are original settlers called spackles. The humans call them spackles. It's both ironic and frustrating to see how they were colonized and treated and marked as aliens in their own land, and that speaks a lot. Again, there were so many things at stake, all for the sake of power and people's varied definition of freedom and leadership. This book didn't lack the betrayals, the deaths. It was still relentlessly surprising and searing, even though it has the same concept. It just has more stakes right now. The stakes are just higher this time. Another interesting part about this book is that Viola and Todd somehow gets mixed up in the war and end up in different enemy camps, although there's nothing good about war, okay? It's just refreshing to see how, for a moment, their morals were different from each other, even though initially they have the same goal. So again, if you're looking for super fast-paced, super action-packed book, pick The Ask and the Answer along with The Knife of Never Letting Go. Beware of the trigger warnings. Again, there's brutality, there's violence, there's war, torture, bombing, and slavery. So after reading The Ask and the Answer, I read The Wide Wide Sea. It's a companion novella after The Ask and the Answer, which gives a bit of a background on what will happen on Monsters of Men, which is the third and final book. The Wide Wide Sea shows what transpired prior to the Spackle War 13 years ago. This was before the events of The Knife of Never Letting Go, so somehow a prequel again of The Knife of Never Letting Go. And it takes place in a town called Horizon, and it shows the forbidden love between a human and a spackle, and the lengths that humans would go to destroy a love that they could just not simply understand. It's so gripping to read, and I give this novella 4.5 stars because it's just so good. It was thrilling and it was heartbreaking. There were just some lines that really hurt, like, it's unnatural, she's an animal. Although spackles look different from humans because physically they look a bit different, and the way that they communicate is also different. I think they communicate through thoughts, like they don't verbally speak. Unlike the earlier novella, this one is such a great addition to the story because it gave me a bit of a background on one or two characters from The Ask and the Answer. It shows the very humane side of that character by breaking traditions, even though she was the mayor of Horizon and the people that she lived with are telling her that, you know, we need to banish this guy because he's in love with the spackle and it's embarrassing, it's against our rules, it's against our nature. I was in awe of the story and was very, very invested. When I was reading The Knife of Never Letting Go and The Ask and the Answer, it never actually crossed my mind that, oh, what if a human and a spackle fell in love? It was this book that I was like, oh yeah, that is possible. I was just mostly focused on Todd and Viola, so this was a very refreshing and great addition to the story. So the third and final book of the trilogy is Monsters of Men. And look at this monster of a book. It's so chunky. It's 600 plus pages, mind you. Although, don't let that scare you because it's still a very fast-paced book. Like, I sped through this in like 3 days, I think. 3 days or 5 days. When I was listening to the audiobook, when I was reading it, everything just flows so fast. The narration really helped with going through this monster of a trilogy. The finale it's kind of hard to explain, but this is like the culmination of the build-up of the first two books and the novellas. This is where the army of the mayor and Mistress Coyle, who was the mayor of Horizon, the new settlers who are coming to New World from a different planet. So this three groups of people will be deciding whether they want peace or they want war. I'm speechless. Like, it's just so hard to explain without sort of spoiling some things, because at this point, Todd and Viola is still alive. The book is told in the perspective of Viola, Todd, and one spackle. That one spackle is seen in The Knife of Never Letting Go and plays such a huge part in this book. The book is still mostly fast-paced, and it actually left me wondering what will happen with the rest of the book, because like I think the first 50 pages there was so much shit going on, like bombings and like violence, and I'm like, we're just the first 50 pages. Like, what would happen with the other 550 pages? One of the most interesting things about this book is the POV of the spackle. It was so different from Todd's and Viola's in a sense that their values and what they're fighting for was the same, but the means to get there is different from Todd's and Viola's. And I'm like, this shit is good. This shit is getting good. The different point of views actually made the book way longer than expected, but I understand the writing decision because it actually made the book more interesting and in-depth, because you see the different sides of war for peace. Like, you get Todd's perspective, you get Viola's perspective, you get this spackle's perspective. The lessons and the messages that it's trying to convey, like, one, the thirst for power and domination ultimately results to that person's demise in any shape or form. The second is that when it comes to war, it's almost impossible to set aside personal feelings and agenda, no matter who you are, no matter what role you play in this war. The third is the commentary on the original settlers of the planet being treated like shit was a reflection on our worlds. The spackles were treated like slaves in their own land. Fourth, I think, is that people can have really twisted and conflicting ideologies. Mayor Prentice believes that it's war that makes men men, you know, and it's a price that they are willing to pay. Like, the fuck? Why would you want to go to war just so you can call yourself a man? Speaking of Mayor Prentice, another message that was very rampant in this story is that power changes people, whether that's for the better or for the worse. After reading Monsters of Men, I read the last novella called Snowscape, and it tells the story of post Monsters of Men, where Haven residents, because when whatever happened in the third book, they now call that town Haven. And Haven residents went on an exploration beyond their town. The group of explorers met a different tribe of spackles that aren't connected with the greater population. Because as I've mentioned before, the way that spackles communicate with each other is through their noise. They don't necessarily speak out loud, but they can communicate no matter distance, and these group of spackles aren't, you know, in the radar. I actually really loved Snowscape. There are new characters. The stake is still high somehow because there's survival. There is a monster involved. Somehow, Patrick Ness still managed to deliver such a cliffhanger of an ending to the whole series, and I'm like, it was so mind-bending. Like, it's something that I'm hoping to happen, but then it actually happened, and I'm just in pure shock. And it was such a satisfying end to the series. If Patrick Ness actually decides to pick the story up again and create a few novellas, I will immediately pick it up because it's just good. Are the 1,698 pages of this thick boys worth it? I'm gonna have to say yes. It's super worth it. I highly recommend that you read this series, especially with an audiobook on, because it'll just fly by so fast. It's so action-packed and it's so fast-paced, and it's a great trilogy. The trilogy is also accessible in a way that there aren't that many complicated terms, or there aren't that many confusing things happening. Like, it will guide you to whatever it is that's gonna happen to the end of the trilogy. The build up is so good, and again, I highly suggest that you read this with the audiobook on, because the narration, the production value is just so amazing, and it makes for a very immersive read. I promise you it's worth it.